Welcome to my first video ever. It is Leap Day, and what better time is there to start doing something than Leap Day? It only comes every 4 years. So today I'm going to try and demystify seam allowance and sewing straight seams, and I hope that if this is helpful. I think that there's a lot of confusion when it comes to sewing. Number one, because it does take some mind bending to be able to learn a new skill. Number two, when you're learning a new skill, the people who tend to be really good at that skill have developed it so much that they've forgotten all the little micro steps. For them, it's like, just sew it. But there's way more to it than that. I had that kind of experience when I was learning to drive a stick shift. My mom was trying to teach me, and it seemed like there were, to her mind, there were 3 steps. To me, it seemed like there were 50. And it was very difficult to find out what all those little other steps that you just kind of got at one point, where they fit in and how they work together. So today, I'm hoping, even though I've been sewing for 20 plus years, to help demystify seam allowance, because I think it is the #1 reason why people give up on sewing when they're just starting out. They cannot get the seams to be the way that they expect them to be. So hopefully something that I'll share today will be helpful to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. All right, let's get started. So maybe one of the reasons I'm good at sewing is because when I was in 8th grade and I was taking Clothing 1, the TA was trying to show me where 5/8 of an inch away from the needle was, and for some reason, because it's so small of a distance, this is 5/8 of an inch, I saw her finger point here at 5/8 of an inch, which is a 1/2 of an inch. Therefore, on my assignment to sew around a square at 5/8 of an inch, all the way around with nice corners, putting my needle down on the corners and everything like that, I did it completely wrong and was docked points. And there was a determination in me that I was going to get it right and I was going to be really good at this. Maybe that's the reason why, who really knows? But it is very important to get your seam allowances correct when you're learning how to sew. And if you get that right, it might give you the kind of success that you need, that kind of good feedback to continue on with something that can be a very difficult hobby for some people. What I've done today to help make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else like it happened to me, I've taped down this tape measure to my sewing machine using some blue painter's tape because I know it's not going to leave a really nasty residue. You can see that where the number 10 is right here, that's where the needle comes down, okay? And these lines on this particular sewing machine, most of them are 1/8 of an inch apart, starting at 1/4 of an inch. It's covering the line right here right now, so you can't see it. And then this one right here is 3/8 of an inch. This line right here is 5/8 of an inch, or a 1/2 an inch. 4/8 of an inch. This one right here is 5/8. I'm going to go over those again. 3/8, 4/8 or 1/2, 5/8, 6/8 or 3/4 of an inch. There isn't a 7/8, and then there's a 1 inch, which is 8/8. If you look while the presser foot is down, you can see that the presser foot itself is a little bit wider than 1/4 of an inch right at the edge. The entire width from here to here is 5/8 of an inch, so you're about a 1/16 of an inch over, which you can see on my tape measure right here. Most of the time, unless you're doing a quilting project that requires very demanding accuracy, sewing at the edge of the presser foot for 1/4 of an inch is good enough. Most of the time, however, if you're sewing clothes, especially with commercial patterns that are using a woven, the seam allowance you'll be using is 5/8. 5/8 is the most common. But one of the things that can be really difficult when you're first starting to learn how to sew is keeping it right on this mark right here. So first of all, you need to know where that 5/8 inch mark is. In fact, I am going to take the tape measure off. And take one of these pieces of tape right here. Okay. And I'm going to put it on that 5/8 mark right now. Oh wait, before I do that, you can see that there are other measurement markings on the bottom. This is because it's very close to the metric system. Now, it's not exactly exact. It's kind of close. So 3/8 is also really, really close to 10 millimeters. And this 5/8 is not, I don't know how this math works out actually, because it looks like it's 1/3 of this. So 1/3, 2/3 of 10 millimeters. So it's like 1.5, 1.6 is this 5/8 mark if you're using the metric system. Now you can see right here, this is my 1/4 inch mark. And it's just inside where the feed dogs are and where the edge of the presser foot is. Alright, but I'm going to put this piece of tape on the 5/8 mark right now. The other way around, maybe. This is very difficult. Nope. There we go. So now I've got this on the 5/8 inch mark line. And that is going to be a guide for me if I'm a beginner or something like that, to remember where I am lining my fabric up to the edge of. Now, one of the things that you can do to help practice before you start sewing at this 5/8 of an inch is to bring your presser foot up and just practice keeping the edge of your fabric along the edge of this blue line right here. Okay? Because that's what the fabric's going to do. The sewing machine will pull it through, right, for you, but just practice that. Okay? And then if you want to, you can also practice doing it without thread or without even a needle, just to get a feel of how the machine pulls the fabric through. Oh, see, I did that kind of funny. Alright. And if you keep that edge, this edge of the fabric, right along that line, then your seam allowance will come out to be 5/8 of an inch. It will come out to be 5/8 of an inch. The idea is, don't focus on the needle. Like, don't let your hand get, stuck in the needle. Don't focus on the needle. Focus on the edge of the fabric and where the edge of the fabric is. Okay? Alright, so I just changed out the color of my thread really quickly, so it'll be easier to see. Now, I'm going to put this up to the edge, make sure that it's going to actually sew on the fabric. Very nice. Put my Oh, I'm going to turn my machine on. That might help. Now it's a computerized machine, so it takes a little while to boot up. Oh, it's ready. Alright. I'm going to put my presser foot down. Oh, I don't want it right there. Okay. I always like to hold my thread when I'm starting the first stitch, because otherwise sometimes I can lose the top thread, the thread that's in the needle. Or I like to lower my needle into my fabric. Either way, I've got to make sure I'm holding on to this. I'm doing something, either holding it or lowering that needle. Okay, I have a computerized machine, so the needle will stop either completely up or completely down. I'm going to leave it where it stops completely up. So here we go. So I'm going to make my first stitch. All right. Back stitch. This is like knotting if you do a lot of hand sewing. And I'm just going to keep my fabric nicely lined up with my 5/8 inch line where the blue tape is. And now that I'm at the end, I'm going to back stitch. Probably more back stitches than I needed. And okay, as you can see, this is a very nice even seam. Might have moved a little bit. This side looks a little bit uneven, but it's still pretty good. Now, the reason why a straight seam is important is when I open it up, it has this nice straight line. Okay. Now I'm going to do an example of what happens when you don't follow the line. Okay. I see a lot of people when they're first learning how to sew, it's kind of difficult for them to keep this edge nice. All right. So what they'll do is they'll start off really, really great, really awesome like this. And then it starts to get away from them. So it's no longer on this edge right here. It's 1/8 of an inch away. Sometimes people will even accidentally sew off of the edge. The problem is that then they'll just lift the presser foot and fix it. And that kind of works, but you'll see what happens. I'm going to do another one of those. I'm going to go the other way now. And then I realize I've screwed up, so I lift this and I fix it. Okay. Now you can see that it creates an uneven seam like this. Alright, and maybe it's not a big deal, but when I open this up, those spots where it's uneven, if I needed to press this down, I'd have a little bit of a bubble right here, right? And also right there. Okay, so it doesn't create a really nice looking seam. It will have little bubbles and pops and stuff like that. And if you're sewing clothing, it can actually be really distracting if that's on the side of a seam, and people will look at this little place where your seam is popping out instead of just at the overall look. Okay, now here's one more example. If I just kind of go back and forth, maybe I don't lift my presser foot, maybe I always make sure that I'm just, you know, being nice and smooth, and I create, you know, curvy lines. I'm going to do some curvy lines. I'm going to start out nice, then I do curvy lines. Well, let's end it at 5/8 of an inch. No, not quite 5/8. Alright. Let's see how that looks. Where I put my scissors. Alright, so I've got this curvy line now. And it looks smooth. That's good. Alright. But when I open it up, there are little pockets again, like that. Okay? That's the reason why you want to have a nice straight seam. Now, if you're going for this look, now you know how to do it. But if you're just going for a nice flat seam, you need to have a straight line. Or if you're sewing around a curve, you need to, well, we'll talk about curves another time. But if you have a straight seam, then you need a straight line. The best way to do that is to keep your fabric edge lined up with the line that you've chosen. And go slowly at first. Practice it. Alright. So I've ironed them now. This is the one that I sewed nice and straight. Okay? As you can see, you can just see the thread color peeking through. Okay, normally you would, you know, match same colors, but this shows. And then on this side, I pressed them open, the seams open. Same thing, looks really nice. Okay, and it's folded right on where the line of thread is. Okay. Now here's the one where I jumped. Okay, where I jumped. Okay, the fold isn't able to go in a straight line, so then the fold kind of jumps around. So what I've got, I mean, I've ironed it so that it looks like it's a straight seam, but you can see that there's extra stuff I could have pulled out. Maybe I could have ironed that out a little bit more, but then it would create a bulge. Same thing here. I could have ironed that out a little bit more, but it's just hard. It's just hard to do. Okay. And then you can see, I don't know if you can see, but there's a bulkiness in here because even though this is out like this, like there should be almost nothing. There should just be thread in between these two layers right here, like there is at this section right here. But instead I've got extra fabric because I want, you know, I'm trying to get it to lay flat instead of bulging around and stuff like that. Okay, so it's just kind of, you can see the fold line where I ironed it. It was difficult to iron too. Okay, same thing with the one with the curvy line. So this is the one with the curvy line. Same thing. Well, you can see where the thread pokes out. That's where it gets close. But there's more fabric in there, and it should be ironed more like out like that. But it's just very difficult because, you know, you've got to fold it and then press it. You're folding. I mean, have you ever tried to fold a crooked line? I mean, and by crooked I mean like it jags one way, then jigs and jags one way than the other, or zigs and zags. All right. And then on this other side, you can see where this is where it's really close, and I could have pulled this apart more right there, but it was a lot more difficult to do. So it was a lot harder to iron these two pieces that were not nice and even seams, that weren't straight. The one that was really, really easy to iron and the one that looks the best is the one that's straight. It's straight. So when I iron it, I just open it up, and then I open this part up. Now, not all seams are done that way, but whenever possible, I try and open up my seams. It has them lay nice and flat, nice and smooth. Okay, so that's what they look like ironed. Here are my 3 different samples again. You can see that the top one is the straight one because it makes a square, and the other 2 are crooked. So that also makes a difference. When you don't sew a straight line, you might end up with a crooked, not square thing. Bruce is really hoping that we're done by now. Huh, Bruce? He's tired of me standing up and sitting down, and standing up and sitting down, and taking his comfy spot, and picking him up. He just wants me to stay sitting or stay standing so he can stay in my chair. Yep. Puppies. Yep. So, I encourage all of you, if you're new to sewing and this, if you're already past seams, great. If you're not, I highly encourage just go and get a little bit of fabric and try sewing a straight seam. Try sewing a jumpy seam, and try sewing a curvy seam, and then press it open. See how it looks. See how it feels. Get a feel for it. That way you can get a better idea of how things act. Kind of be a scientist, right? Be a scientist. Test things. You're not going to hurt the sewing machine by testing if a seam is straight or not. You're not going to spend a lot of money if you just buy a little bit of fabric, like 1/4 of a yard, and you'll have plenty to do testing on. Or better yet, go to the remnant section where they have things on discount. Normally they're in little rolls, right? I don't know if I have any around here right now. But I buy remnant rolls all the time. And those are really great because you get them at a discount price. It's just a teeny tiny bit of fabric, but that's what you need. That's all you need. And also while you're starting out, it doesn't really matter if while you're testing things, if you have your thread match. It's actually kind of better if your thread doesn't match. Or put one thread in the top and one thread in the bottom that are different colors. That's a really good way to figure out what the top thread is doing versus the bottom thread. Test things out. That's actually one of the things I was told in a video when I was learning how to thread a serger, and that's this thing over here, is the sergers are more complicated because they've got 4 strings, and this video said play around with the different tensions on the serger because you're not going to hurt the serger unless it starts making a funny sound, right? If you hear funny sounds, stop. But you're not going to hurt the serger by playing around with the different tensions. It's designed to do that. The sewing machine is designed to sew, okay? It's not going to hurt it if you sew a seam crooked. So, anyways, I hope that that's been helpful. Go and try it. All right, bye. You have no shame. You taking my spot?